this is a part of a series. And as we go from one city to another, we've already been to Delhi, to Bengaluru, Mumbai, and now we come to Hyderabad. Now this doesn't mean Chennai and Pune, where we go to next, is lesser important. Every place is important for us. And the leaders from those cities, in companies, in enterprises, are important as well. You need to listen to all of them. And broadly, I'll just give you a sense. As we come to the city where GCCs, pharma companies are making a big name for themselves, Hyderabad is known for that. It's important that we help the city and the local business population catapult to the next level, and hence their input and their views on how you can probably be the people leaders of tomorrow. So am I fair with that observation? Okay. So as we referred to in the beginning, work, workforce, and workplace, they're all changing. And some of these people, and some few, are driving that change. What changes can be expected? What changes must happen? I'll first start with Professor, with you, drawing upon your industry experience, and how does the classroom help change that? Some of the things that we need to make note of as an industry, as cutting across industries. If you'd like to give a broad picture, please.
Say a little more. I've not got the question though.
So the question is, what should be the people leaders' key agenda as we drive in this era where VUCA is history? Now they talk Bani.
Yeah.
And the uncertainty, next gen, and a whole lot more.
After Bani, there is flux.
After
flux,
yeah.
There is something else.
Yeah.
So, no, it's a very important question, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to start this. Actually, this is a large subject. In the hands of a professor, it can become a class. So you have to be careful that I don't indulge in that. I think there are three mega trends that will have big impact on everything that we do, and they can be easily described as 3Ds. One is digital, another is demographic, and the third is disruption. These are the three trends that are affecting organizations, therefore affecting people leadership. Therefore affecting that function which supports the people leadership, which happens to be HR. It's very important to remember that HR does not manage people. People managers manage people, and HR supports them. So in that context, HR also has to understand what managers will face, and therefore be ready to support them in this new era. What are the top headlines between the 3Ds is what I will leave, but in how they actually operate, my colleagues from industry will probably share with you more great details. The digital today, its latest version is called AI. Okay, but I am very sure, much like big data was looking very big just a few years ago, AI will also look not so big in just a few years ago, and something else will replace it, most likely quantum computing. So we must be prepared for ever changing, but one thing that has changed forever, and that is we will interact with each other world over, not so much physically, but digitally. And therefore our co-workers will be digital, our workplace will be digital, our work will be digital, and half of us will be digital. Our children are almost 3/4 digital. So we must know that this is the future, and it takes different shapes at different time. This time it has taken a really revolutionary shape in the name of AI. And what AI can do is unimaginably, almost life-threatening. It's not wonder the creator of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, calls it as an existential threat. So we should all be very, very careful about AI. It's at the same time a great opportunity, but it also is quite a bit of a challenge. If you don't govern it well, and shape it well and use it for the right purposes, it's likely to be the biggest rogue, which it's already showing tendencies of. That's the first big change. What will that mean to people leaders? It'll mean that, among other things, one thing it'll mean is that people leaders must learn to lead not just human beings, but also machines. So the worker will also be an AI agent or a robot, and therefore you didn't know how to lead normal people. Now you have to learn how to deal agents who deal with people and people who deal with or don't deal with agents. And a new orchestration will take place at the workplace. All the definitions of processes, systems, KPIs, deliverables, efficiency, etc. will undergo a change. I can go on, but that's the first headline there. And for demographic shift is equally important to understand. That will affect people governance a lot in different countries in different ways. So the beauty about our country is we are at that end of the demographic shift where the Gen Zs and Gen Alphas and large number of younger people will be in our workforce. We like them, our children, but we don't like them as employees. And so that's a hypocrisy we have to overcome. So we are very free with them. We consult them even to order food on Swiggy. But when come to office, we deal with them like, you know, the old age, must listen, subordinate. This won't work. We are going to relearn and must relearn how to handle a whole new generation of expectations. And the employees will not take the BS that generally is produced in organizations. So this is a big, big change. But this change takes a different shape in Europe and America. They have the opposite problem. They don't have enough people in the workforce. So they will need more machines. So one of the implications for that is, if India is wise, it won't blindly imitate the West and bring more machines to replace human beings. And because we need jobs, jobs are our biggest thing. So demographic shift demands a different people governance. It certainly heightens the bar for governance, transparency, reciprocity, mutuality, consent, consultation, participation, and democratic egalitarian environments. That's the implication of the demographic shift. Disruption is what Asutosh was referring throughout the conversation. The big difference between change and disruption is change a little more gradual, like my bald head. So, but disruption is like I lose my head types. So please understand that disruption is something that doesn't come with you great notice. It just happens one day in China, next day the whole world has a pandemic. So the last disruption we saw was pandemic, but this is picture abhi baki hai. The real disruption is going to come in the name of climate change. And climate change is on the corner. We are already experiencing it. We don't recognize it. But when it happens now in a bigger shape, that we will be sitting here and a flood might impact us, that is when you will realize that we are in a very different world. Disruption is not only in climate change, disruption also will in technology. AI is a big disruption. AI itself, generative AI and AI is disruption. Quantum computing would be even bigger a disruption. What does that mean to people managers? The whole principles of management were designed in times when life was more stable and predictable and continuous. Now, it's going to be more ad hoc, more transactional, more transient. It has to be much more spontaneous in its responses. People managers must have to deal with people who are here, not there, sometime there, sometime there. Work is happening, not happening. It's not going to be a consistent world anymore. So 3 things that will impact people management of the future, sir. 3 Ds, digital, demographic, and disruptive.
Wow, that's scary now. So since you mentioned, Professor, I'll just add a remark. You know, the last impact that China had was not just the pandemic, it was also the deep seek. So, you know, so it's not just on the negative, I'd like to believe not just on the negative side with the pandemic, also the positive. So Sashi, we're looking at a revolution of sorts. But is this the evolution of people managers that will drive the change? What are smart companies trying to do with their people?
So when you look at what companies are trying to do, I'll just sort of go back to when the moderator of the session started and asked this question about how many of you are struggling to hire. A lot of people put their hands up. Surprisingly, if you were to ask job seekers, and we did that in a survey, almost 45% said, look, it's tough for us to find jobs. So clearly, there is a mismatch. And I think companies, as we go forward, to start with, will be looking to address this mismatch with technology, increasingly AI. Second, from the other side of the lens, from people, job seekers, I mean, given that I've spent over 20 years in recruitment, online recruitment, a lot of people come and ask me, with young children, what should my child study? What should they get into for them to be relevant tomorrow? It's a tough question, really. I mean, and now more than ever, we have lesser answers. But I believe there are three things that people should, and this is what I tell people, three things. The first one, learn to deal with failure. That will be something which we will need to teach our children or get them to sort of deal with. All of us who've spent a lot of time working, we've had failures, but our children will fail more. And they'll need to deal with that. And their success will depend on how well they're able to deal with failure. Second, in terms of ability to adapt, that is something which people will need to have. And as we go, and this applies both to the employers and people who are coming through the workforce. Now, sort of to get back to your question on what companies can do, companies will increasingly use, because now, you have technology that is changing very often, you have skills that are coming up very often, changing very often. Companies will look for people who have the ability to skill themselves. We are talking about skills-based hiring, and technology will help with that. In my days, when I had to recruit, let's say 10 years back, if I had to recruit a salesperson, I'll say, okay, who's done enterprise sales for the last 10 years? Best suited for my role, I'll hire them. That's going to change, because we will now look at who can do this job the best. Maybe the answer to that question is not a person who's done sales for 10 years. We'll have to identify skills that make people successful in this job. We'll identify how they can interact with companies and how they are able to sort of bring, for example, skills which they've acquired in other spaces into the job that has to be done. That's one thing which smart companies will do. They will start looking to hire for people based on what skills they need and not necessarily look at experience as the measure of the skill. The second thing that companies will do is look, and we spoke about this a little bit earlier, is we will increasingly see companies have a lot more contract employees, a lot of fractional leaders, etc. That's a change that's going to happen. And it's not something that's going to happen, it's happening. Increasingly, we're seeing a lot of companies engage with fractional leaders, and Professor pointed out that MSMEs are for a lot of roles, which even large companies don't do. Three, companies will look to use this new technology smartly to help empower their employees to perform better in their roles. I think it was some time back, and I don't recall who said it. They said a person will not lose a job to, an employee will not lose job to AI. They will lose a job to another employee who's able to use AI better to do the job. And I think that's something which we will start seeing. People who are able to adapt and use technology better, use AI better. Today, companies, and this is true for India, India's employers are using, not employers, companies are using AI a lot more than many of the counterparts across the world. This is a moment for learning. So like I said, for employees as well, use the technology which companies are giving you access to. And like Professor said, I think this is one of those moments in history when we're going to see a significant change in how companies interact with their customers and with their employees. And a lot of that is going to be led by technology.
Wow, not easy jobs, I would like to believe. My job is easier, just to ask a couple of questions and maybe pretend that I'm very busy and very hardworking. So Mona and Smriti, I'd like to come to you. You both, in your roles and as your company, and okay, Mona, you can start first, are trying to drive a digital workforce working remotely. How does that opportunity, how can that opportunity driving remotely or working remotely help others as well? How can that showcase your global organizations and using a local workforce or a large part of local workforce? How can that be a role model, if I may suggest that? You would like to be copied, but ultimately all successful companies are copied.
Highest form of flattery, last I heard. But yeah, it's a good point. I think we were talking about it earlier today also. It's for us as an organization, at Parexel, I think COVID was, as Sir said, a huge disruptor. It brought in almost 360 degrees change in the way we operated in terms of our operating model. We went from a brick and mortar kind of a shop. 98% of my people were sitting in an office somewhere in the world, definitely in the country. And we went from there to almost, I would say, more than 70 to 75% permanently working from home, and the rest, I would say, in a hybrid. I myself, I'm a remote worker. I take care of the region, and I'm a remote worker. So I think that was a huge shift that we made consciously, and then over a period of time, it has now become a part of our culture. It is a conscious effort. It doesn't come naturally to most of us, and especially in our region, many of us, as much as we are very tech savvy and adopting technology in new ways, somewhere at the back of our head, we're still a little conservative and old school in a few of our thinking, in the region, I would say. So it was a massive undertaking to bring about that change. It was easier at the leadership. The toughest one is the middle management. They're used to working, with their teams. You just go down, pat somebody, shake somebody, have a chat with somebody. That whole world changed. So we had to bring about a lot of changes in the way we work. So the technology that we brought in, bringing in teams that are now not only working remotely within the country or within the region, globally. So the offset of this was that this opened up a wide array of opportunities and exposure to our workforce. So they were now not limited in any shape or form, not that I would like to think that they were earlier, but now that opportunity opened up widely. And as you mentioned, what is the role model or what is that we could share? I would say that one of the big things that we learned was it helped us tap into talent which is so latent in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, which for various reasons can come to the tier 1s, sometimes don't make it, but there is immense talent over there. So we were able to tap into that, and also in this world, in this current reality, where professional and personal spaces are getting blurred, where the traditional work-life balance question, statement, asked and answered clichédly and unproductively forever, we were able to kind of provide to our workforce and employee groups across the globe a fair opportunity to do that. So the shift became from 9 to 5 to what is it that you delivered. So the focus was, this is what you need to deliver. It's not new, it was old, it's known. But I think it's one thing to know something and one thing is to consciously practice. And I can say that even from our organization, my own team, my focus has always been, you're a professional, get the job done. I really don't care, I do care, but really, I don't care what time you're doing, but get the job done.
That's the kind of disrupted world it is.
Yeah, probably I wouldn't be saying the statement, say, a decade ago, yeah? But the world has changed, it has changed me, it has changed my thinking, it has changed the thinking of people around me, and I think it's for the better. We were talking about 3 Ds, and we talked about the 3 things he said I always tell everybody. So I said, okay, I'm going to share the 3 things. So I'm going to pick a line from your statement just now. You said, somebody famously said, AI is not going to, take away our jobs. It's going to be somebody who knows AI better who's going to be doing it. I would just go a line further and say that AI has the opportunity to actually amplify your capabilities if you kind of leverage it appropriately. And in my mind, I think since we're an alphabet, sir, I'm going to go one step behind you and say C's. So my 3 C's are that if, for future leaders, leveraging AI is great, but they will not replace the workforce, they will not replace the leadership, as long as the leadership or the emerging leadership is foundationed in 3 things. 1, because AI can't take that. AI can't do that. I still believe that. One is critical thinking, one is creative approach, and the last is collaboration. These are things that, of course, still to a large extent remain within the human domain, and it's up to you, and it's up to me, and it's up to all of us how much we're still able to exploit or explore that. And since I come from the healthcare domain, I can't but help to say that for any emerging leader or an established leader, the fourth C would be compliance. We come from an industry, compliance and ethics is the bedrock. That's where everything starts. So unless an individual, a professional, a leader, anybody, a manager, anybody, you haven't got your embedded compliance and ethics, you're in a little bit of murky water.
Okay. So we're going to be talking a lot of alphabets, but just one thing to mention. In case you have any questions, just keep them ready, but because we want some questions tossed to one of you, they'll choose. So I'll come to you in a little while, so keep the questions ready. And you know, since we spoke of disruption, Professor, you know the strongest Hyderabad connection to global disruption? Anyone wants to take a guess? A Hyderabad connection to global disruption? I'll take the name and you guys will say yes. Sorry? Satyam was not disruption. It was non-compliance. Okay. Let me take the name. Abhishek Sharma, SRH. He's disrupted cricket, isn't he? And see how the thought has changed. So it begins with the thought, Smriti. How is your company, Pegasystems, looking to do it and driving it from here?
Thanks, Ashutosh, and thank you, Vikas, for having us here. I think to begin with, I want to say +1 to Mona, because I think I could kind of echo with her thought process. So I come from a company which is a product organization, and if you've taken a plane, or if you've swiped your credit card, or if you walked into a bank, you would have Pega running at the back end. And so compliance and quality are the bedrock to anything and what we do and how we do. But having said that, I think where we are marching is in the AI space. So we are a typical knowledge working company. And for me, 25% of my workforce is remote in India. 50% of my workforce is remote globally, right? So I just want to set the context here. So we deal with a lot of things, you know, in the manufacturing world. I'm sure, you know, you've heard Mona, you're going to hear, you know, Amit, we've heard Shashi. I think all of us bring in a very diverse perspective. But what I can offer is how we've changed and evolved in this disruptive environment, like Prof said, right? And for me, I think it all started with, you know, the culture moving out and the values moving out of our decks and our posters to actually sensing them and the behaviors that come out of it. So when you are talking about a culture where your workforce is distributed, skills are fluid, clients are looking for agility, right? Because all our clients are listening, hearing about automation, AI. So the speed of change has really impacted our work, right? And what we do and how we do. I think impacts all of us in terms of how we define outcomes, how do we define work, and how do we ensure that our deliverables are meeting and I would say exceeding expectations. So we all have a customer base to meet expectations, whether it is the people who buy our product or our employees. For me, that's a big stakeholder, right? And I think what we realized was we had to innovate truly in this disruption. And when I say that, I meant our culture had to be broken down into bits and bytes so that people could understand us even if they did not see us. Even if we don't have a stand-up meeting every day, are people still trying to understand what do we stand for? Even if we don't have those coffee conversations every day or the water cooler conversations, are we still able to understand each other and listen to understand each other and not to talk to each other? And most importantly, how do we continue to be a brand of choice? Right? Just some figures. Our retention rate has gone up to 30% in the last 3 years. Our stock price has gone up to 70% in the last 3 years. And that's all because we were able to go on board and start experimenting. I think the key word that I'd like to share here was we really pivoted towards a growth mindset. Let me talk to you about a minute about what's growth mindset. Of course, we've heard Carol Dweck, but when it came to managing an organization and its culture, we had to revisit every stage of the employee life cycle, right from hiring to exit. Even from, not just hiring, but understanding the value that we are bringing in on the table. And a lot of times, I think we were all discussing this in our break room as a panel, and if I may have your permission, we all say that, okay, we want to hire people that are a culture fit, right? And the panel came up with a very good thing which we all are living right now is we need people who can be aligned with their strengths, and we need to have a culture that absorbs them rather than a culture fit. So we don't have to be in a box. And that was the biggest change in mindset, the biggest change when we talk about growth mindset. We had to make changes in how do we evaluate people. We had to make changes in how do we grow people. We had to make changes in terms of how do we enable careers which were very, very traditional. And what it also brought in was our ability to take on more challenges because we were able to automate and use AI for a lot of automation, but we were able to spend more time with our customers in actually hearing their problems. So the first time, the product managers, the engineer on the floor at a junior level could actually be part of customer conversations and drive meaningful outcomes and solve customer problems rather than trying to do everything on the code, right? So I think what it has helped us is create a culture, help us experiment to drive the experiences that we need both for our employees and clients. And very importantly, one of the things that I want to bring in is a leadership mindset. This needs a lot of disruption and learning and agility from the leaders on the floor. A typical all hands that we all have every quarter consists of slides and agenda. We broke the mold by saying, ask anything. Just ask anything. Because we are going through this transition in this phase, so boxing things and labeling things and trying to show the same thing that's available publicly or that's available in the internal and external forums makes no sense. So we made our leaders more vulnerable, which was not easy. There were a lot of times when they didn't have answers to questions. And they said, I am sorry, but I need to go back and get you answers. That was a beginning of how we need to bring in the learning mindset, not just with the employees, but also leaders demonstrating it on the floor. Imagine asking the CXOs on the call saying, hey, I don't know this, but I'll get back to you. But the leader did get back to the person. In fact, we made sure we closed it in the next all hands again for everybody's record and reference. So I think having that ability to experiment, to fail, and to be able to celebrate that is going to be the need of the hour because we don't know the roles that we are hiring for. Right, Shashi? We don't even know whether succession slates are going to work or not for the roles that we are planning. So I think having that ability, the agility, and the growth mindset in the digital world is going to play a huge role for all of us as we go forward.
Wow. So Amit, the digital part that Shruti mentioned is also evolving for your sector, the healthcare sector. India is looking to build a digital healthcare system where everything from the tests to records to hospitals, everything is connected. And that could be a different thing altogether, possibly for the world. how does talent come in? Because you would also, besides your own people, the people here in the country, you'd also need the best practices from around the world for that. Because we're in Hyderabad, could that be a lab for that?
So thank you, Ashutosh. I think a great question. First, let me thank ET, AU Small Bank, and all of you here for putting this together. I think great question, Ashutosh. I think we at CARE Hospitals, we are a traditional, or used to be a traditional hospital, chain of hospitals. And I think healthcare is one of the fields that's going to be most transformative in the coming years. If you look at any company in the world, what are they trying to do is disrupt healthcare. Today, Google wants to do healthcare. GE, almost majority of the business is now focused on healthcare. If you look at Philips, that used to do a wide range of things, has now moved to the core being healthcare. Siemens has moved to the core of healthcare, which means if one field that's likely to be disrupted most through any digital technology AI is healthcare. So I see a couple of things that are going to really, really impact us. The first, we have a group of traditionals, doctors, Gen Y, 50s, 60s, that are most famous, and you and I want to go to somebody who's at least got a little gray hair, right? At least, that I trust him. Surgery, definitely yes. Whereas my other half that enables the gray hair is a very young millennial. Now you look at this generational shift, and so this doctor today, most of his patients are coming through social or digital media. And there's a small guy in his 28 telling the doctor that aap to aate hi nahi ho. You don't know how to talk on social media. Aap aisa kyun karte ho? And this guy doesn't understand. So look at the interaction of a 50 and a 28, and they've got to be working together. So for us, that's a huge challenge in bringing two very divergent generations together. Now, digital is a thing to stay. So what we started was, in one of my previous organizations, again in healthcare, very large healthcare setup, was reverse mentoring. We said, how can the doctor teach this guy some medicine so that he can be qualified? And how can this guy teach him some digital skills? And it was dangerous, treacherous, and so much hatred in the system because both thought that they didn't have. Eventually it started working out. But that dichotomy is going to be even more increasing because you got young millennials, and there's no conversation with the millennials actually happening at the workplace. And you have these people who think differently, work differently, and need to be incorporated in the workplace for us. So that's going to be a big one for us when you're talking of the whole mindset and ability. The second is even behaviors. When you look at the world today, we'd never imagined, I'd never thought 15 years ago, that what somebody eats, what he does, whom he's dating, who's broken off, he's marrying, not marrying, what he's eating, where he's going, is all going to be public. And with all of this information now at the workplace, how are you managing these two generations that are going to be coming together? So that's a huge behavioral implication for one, to leave the customized value systems that we've been brought up to what's right and wrong in itself in the workplace. Because how does workplace really work? Is we have respect for each other. There are certain values and systems that have been brought out, which might not be. So for us to manage these ecosystems is going to be a huge, huge difficulty. I think the third, like you're talking about, the whole AI, digital and technology bit. When I started Workforce, my mentors would often tell me, make sales your best friend. You have to understand business. You have to understand how revenue comes in. HR is going to be. We made sales heads our best friends. Slowly that moved to finance heads. I took my leadership role. They said, finance got to be a best friend. If you don't understand numbers, you can't be a great CHRO. I made finance my best friend. Today the trend's gone. Today what they're saying, man-machine interaction. The CTO has to be a best friend. I've changed 3 best friends in my life in the workplace. So for tomorrow's CHRO, if you don't understand the man-machine interaction and how they're going to work together, it's not going to happen. So today, what am I trying to do? My most effective person is my CTO saying, yeah, how do I get recruitment to be digital and AI enabled so that my person doesn't have to do? I have 12 people doing recruitment. How do I reduce it to 6? Those are the level of the conversation. It's not a cost conversation. It's a productivity conversation. Cost is an outcome. Now, some of these places, when you look at it, how digital or technology or AI is going to impact, is going to be hugely significant in the healthcare space or any other industry that you talk about. So some of these impacts, if we are not prepared for, and I'm having a shock of my life in my late 40s, to say, am I really prepared to, manage this new generation of workforce who are doing everything digitally, thinking everything digitally? Will I even be able to fit in there? Because there's a whole new paradigm shift of the workforce that's going to be coming in. So some of these are going to be very interesting perspectives going forward.
So the interesting thing is across sectors, you're hearing what the leaders are saying. And that's where the common theme goes in. And Vikash, before I come to you with the question, just a little context. Here's a small finance bank, born not too long ago, now which is going to be a universal bank. That's the in-principle approval you have from the RBI just a few months ago. They're looking to challenge the big daddies of banking. And hopefully, that requires a certain mindset, a certain skill for the people. Vikash, tell us, how do you even dare challenge, name any of the top banks in the country? What mindset does it take? What is that mindset that these leaders need to build in their teams?
Yeah, thank you, Ashu. Is it me only hearing the echo or everybody else?
Sorry?
Can everybody else hear the echo? On the stage we can hear the echo, right? So which is why I was just trying to check. Because I was going back with the thought that not only the Golconda Ford echoes, but no hotel also echoes here. So which is why I was just checking. Since Mona and Professor Sripad were also mentioning about acronyms here, and you mentioned about 3Ds, and she mentioned about Cs now, I thought 10 years back when a certain person came to power, I could have the most visible name with my surname also there. So when the lady was introducing me, I thought, why is she doing it? सिर्फ नाम ही काफी है, right? And वहाँ पे तो विकास है कि नहीं है, यहाँ पे तो विकास भी है, मोदी भी है. So please don't record it because I don't want someone to come to my place just because
this is a newspaper event, by the way.
I know.
So you can't say don't record it. It will be recorded and played, I'm sure.
Okay. Just to make it a bit lighter because post-lunch it becomes a bit challenging sometimes. So coming back, and let me correct some bit of, Ashu, what you said. We are looking to challenge the big daddies. No, we're already challenging them, and let me emphasize why I'm saying that. So today, as we speak, just to highlight, while three of my colleagues on the dais mentioned about global organizations, we are a very local organization aspiring to be global. So that's a reverse mentoring as Amit was alluding to, right? The day we become a universal bank, and it should be happening in the next 1 year from here on, from a market cap perspective, we will be above many other banks which you know of today, right? So that's where it stands. So just to correct Ashutosh, so we are already in that space challenging the big daddies of banking. How do you do it? From a very traditional organization which started its roots from Jaipur, how is it creating waves across the country? The point is, and this is referring to what Amit was also alluding to, this is the mindset. This is the mindset of resilience. This is the mindset of why can't I do it? This is a mindset of what is in it for me. These are the three things which these generations currently are bothered about. Let me take a step back and tell you what is happening in the economy as a whole, as a country. From a purely agrarian and a services-led economy, we are moving towards a knowledge-based economy. Please remember that. This is happening. We used to call centers earlier. I mean, I remember, now we don't call it call centers. We call it what? GCCs. C is for what? Capability. Global capability. Knowledge is synonymous with capability, right? So you're no more, the mindset is positioning yourself. The generation today is positioning that I am no more a product or a services-led, ITES, we used to call it. My co-panelist here mentioned, I am from a product company, right? Why do you say that? Why do you emphasize that? So that's the mindset change which is happening across the entire industry. Whichever industry you belong to, whether it's financial services, whether it's technology, whether it is healthcare, and Sashi mentioned about, he was talking to me about Indeed and how they are different from other platforms in the similar space. The point I'm trying to make here is, and I'm tying up with what Professor Sripad mentioned, the 3Ds. If you see the common thread which will enable the 3Ds is knowledge. Whether to deal with disruption, and I actually wanted to step in when he mentioned that AI is not the in thing. Trust me, I agree with him, quantum computing is the next thing. I know of companies which are immensely spending and doing research at the back end on quantum computing, and you've not even scratched the surface on that particular technology till now. Coming to your, just to sum up, India is a land of opportunities today, right? How is it you are dreaming such big things as an organization where you are challenging and purposefully, since Sashi reminded me that it's a print media, you cannot be taking names. I will not take names, Ashutosh, of the big daddies of banking, certainly. We all know who they are, right? So how are we challenging them? Challenging them by disruption, by using technology for finding solutions, individualized solutions, right? One size fits all will not work in this country anymore, right? People or the big daddies of banking are predominantly focused upon the affluent segments, and they are focused on those segments where they generate value out of. We are focused upon the entire spectrum, and we want to cater to the entire spectrum, irrespective of which value they bring across to us, so that they have the choice at their end, so that they make those choices and make their own decisions. That's the disruption which we are trying to bring about.
Okay, so questions, I think if you're ready, we can come to question, then again, go round. Okay, so we'll just get the mic to you. Can we get a mic there, please? Yeah, please. Please identify yourself and ask the question. We'll try and make it as crisp as possible.
Yeah. So, hi, my name is Imtiaz. I am Group CHRO of IKF Finance. My question here is to Modi ji on a lighter note. I have been following you, sir, from Yes Bank, HDFC. I have just completed 20 years in NBFC, and I'm a big fan of you. I have a very small and basic question. As sir said that there is a mismatch, someone said about reverse mentoring. I was with Mahindra, and Anand Mahindra implemented reverse mentoring by getting people from Harvard in 2015. So at that stage, at that level, Mahindra was talking about reverse mentoring. But my question to you is, in the retail lending space, we have a very few population which keeps on shifting one way to another. In my entire life, I have tried to implement a substitute called NEEM, as you know, sir. NEEM, NAPS, NATS, skill building initiative.
So the question, if you can,
India.
because we'll move on.
Yeah. Why is it not working in BFSI space is my question to you. Why it has completely become a failure from at least the last decade, I know.
Okay. So I understand. So retention in the retail finance space specifically, and since you belong to the NBFC world, I can relate to you much more. The challenge is aspirations of the people, and second is, as I mentioned, this immense scope available, right? People have that scope available, which is why possibly they're attuned to the fact that if I'm getting a growth in a different organization, right, I'll move on. Why should I stick to a particular organization, right? So that's one part of it. That's not, that's the generic part of it. However, I can give you numerous other examples also where people do not only stick because of particular compensation packages, but because of the cultural alignment of that individual organization. Take the example of, again, I'm wanted to take names, but I'll restrict myself by not taking names. The largest two NBFCs which do not operate from many of the metro locations, I'm sure you get the names which I'm alluding to, their retention rates are fairly high. Why? Because culturally, they're attuned that way that they imbibe everybody who comes into their fold. And this is what Sashi and we were having a discussion prior to this panel discussion. And Professor highlighted that, is that it's not important as to whether the individual aligns to the institution culture, as to whether the institution is aligned to accept everybody who comes into the culture, right? So I think that is something which will be there. And going forward, and since NBFCs are doing a lot of disruption specifically on the fintech space, right? They're collaborating with fintechs and doing a lot of disruption. My sense is that there will be right, these sort of teams who will come, like garage teams. They'll come, disrupt in a particular organization, move on to the different organization. Right, it'll be evolving to that extent, my dear friend. You may not like it, but that's a fact of life.
Okay, one more question there. We had a question. Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Shivani. I'm heading the HR for a staffing company. And my question is again to Mr. Modi.
Mr. Modi is always in demand, I must tell you.
I know. Yeah, we'll have one-on-one time separately. So my question is that for a service-based organization like ours, where our average years or age of our people is between 24 to 28. So they are the people who earn a lot of money because staffing industry pays a lot of commissions, which is much more than what they earn in terms of salary. So they don't respect that money that they are getting, and they do fringe buying iPhone, the newest iPhone or PlayStation. So how do we leverage organizations or banks like you to disrupt that mindset that this amount that they are getting can be used for saving for their future? How do we start educating in collaboration with you guys?
Saving is so passé, isn't it?
So
I mean, that's what the younger generation seems to think.
No, but I mean,
I'm just on a lighter note.
and more so after Ashutosh, what happens is more so after COVID, people have started realizing if you have it, just flaunt it. I mean, why do you have to keep it in your bank account? But I'll on a mark of caution there, I will tell you, to an extent, this particular mindset it delves into the personal space as well. Let me answer that slightly more differently. If I am, as an organization, what do I price him for? I price him for the contribution. Always you pay for performance and reward for, pay for position and reward for performance. That's a concept everybody follows, right? Now, if you follow that particular concept, and if you are giving him that, what he does with his own money or her own money, I think we should not be. However, as an institution, we try to educate people, and that's I'm speaking on behalf of AU Bank here. We try to educate people how to enhance their lifestyle at each life stage. That's the education we try to give, right? However, do we control his mindset as to whether you should be buying a PlayStation or not? I don't think so. We do that, and we don't intend to do that as well. But yes, do we align him to a thought process to keep on enhancing his lifestyle at each life stage? The answer is yes.
Okay, we'll come back for more questions in a little while. Now let's move on. Since a lot of questions or a lot of interest about the next gen. So Sashi, from your side, I just want to understand, how are the companies preparing for the next gen leaders? What are they looking, or what are they hunting for in these people, tomorrow's leaders?
See, I think when we look at leadership, the first thing we are looking for is adaptability. Leaders need to be able to adapt. Like, I think it was Amit who spoke about working with organizations that got 50 years, doctors who've got a lot of experience, and then 25-year people. How are you able to deal with generational, intergenerational talent. That's something which is important. So adaptability is important. Two, learning mindset is important. I think we need leaders who are able to be open to learning. Taking my own example, the way sales was done when I started my career to how it's done today is completely different. I can't expect what I did from the new people that I hired for my company. Third, and possibly the most important, empathy. We are living in a tough world. We are living in a world where some of the youngsters will not have the kind of continuity, they'll not have the kind of tenure, fixed tenure that a lot of us are used to. How are we able to help assure people that, look, company, how leaders are able to assure their workers, how about when you're part of what we are doing, how is it that you're being taken care of, regardless of whether you can continue doing what you're doing for the next 10, 15 years, or maybe it's just like something that you do for 2 or 3 or 4 years. And finally, it's also about signaling up, right? Leadership is not just about how you manage your teams, but how is it that you let people above you know what's happening, in the sense, provide for that. I know we all spoke about Devdutt Patnaik before we got here. So he spoke about what is called the Sarpa Drishti, right? I mean, the vision of the snake. How is it that leaders, frontline leaders, are able to convey up what is there in the grassroots? And I think sometimes even having the ability to, and this is something which a lot of leaders, I think, in India are starting to develop a lot than in previous generations. How are you able to go up to your leaders and say, look, maybe your thinking is wrong. This is what is happening grounds up. And that's going to become pretty important, because change is rapid. And in rapid change, people who are CXOs may not necessarily have the right answers. And as an organization, it's incumbent on all of us, including people who've just joined, including leaders, young leaders, to have the courage to go up and say, hey, you know what? You're not thinking right. You're not thinking this through right. We need to think differently to be able to survive into the future.
That just triggers in my mind, Smriti and Mona, again the question to you. GCCs, again, this is a GCC city, so to say. Hyderabad and Bangalore definitely are the leaders. GCCs need to think differently than just ramping up with the numbers. How do you contribute to intellectual property, repeatable business, and that? What mindset change do maybe some people here, anyone here from the GCC industry? Okay, there are some. So how should GCCs be looking at it so that you are able to build intellectual property and hence larger value to the parent organization?
I think I'll take a stab at it, and Smriti, if you want to go. Or you want to go ahead?
No, that's fine. And I think a very loaded question, I must say, Ashu. I think
you want to make it simpler? I don't have a problem. Yeah,
yes, I'll
please.
break it down. I'll break it down. So I think what we're trying to say is, while we've evolved into a GCC culture, how do we start creating more value when it comes to our deliverables, when it comes to our assets, when it comes to our bottom line? Did I get your question right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
fair. So ultimately, we are all here to create value for our stakeholders.
Absolutely. And I think value creation comes only if you are curious, if you are agile, and if you are ready to solve customer problems, right? And I think what has really enabled GCCs in this, at least from my lens, from a hybrid environment, is the global exposure, right? A lot of our engineers and architects are playing global role sitting in Hyderabad, right? I'm an example of playing a global role sitting in Hyderabad, managing teams across different regions. Now, have I had this exposure so early in life? Probably not. COVID enabled us to go online, bringing one platform to everybody, one capability network, right, in terms of exchanging and understanding each other's value and creating and amplifying it in a lot of sense. So I think what is also happening is a lot of barriers are getting removed. While new barriers are getting created, there are a lot of biases and a lot of barriers that are getting removed when we are trying to go digital. And that is creating a lot of value addition with our customers. A lot of customers, I mean, we could hardly hear a sales leader or a CXO or a CFO or anybody in the organization going and closing on a deal. Deals do get closed online. I'm not saying people are not traveling, but I think everybody is more appreciative of each other's time. There are so many times when you and I would have said, hey, I know you, we have the trust, we can close this. And we don't have to go to somebody and meet somebody just for the heck of it. So I think there's a lot of incremental value that is getting created in terms of building those trust, building that network, building that understanding, and bridging that gap in terms of what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. I think the also level playing field is how we work, right? And how do we enable working? So I think all those things are creating, but most importantly, I can actually work with some of the most well-renowned people across the globe to solve something in a much shorter duration than it would have taken for me to hire somebody traditionally, like Amit said, right? And so it's also about a paradigm shift. It's also about trying to understand of new ways of working and how we work. But I think it needs guidance, it needs boundaries, it needs a lot of understanding of, you know, what is expected and what's not expected so that we don't go crazy about it.
Mona, creating value for all stakeholders.
I would say there's a reason that you see this mass migration, if I may use the word, and as you mentioned earlier, it's definitely happening in the healthcare industry. It's the most buzzing sector right now. And of course, India provides a cost arbitrage. Everybody gets that. But from a value proposition, my deep faith always has been, you can get the value, you can get the cost arbitrage, but it's not sustainable unless it is backed and deeply embedded in abundant talent. I think what India has to offer, what these cities have to offer is, we offer an immense amount of talent, and that talent is being leveraged for regional, global, India, whatever roles you want to talk about it, and that is what is sustaining it in the future. So the value proposition that you are mentioning, of course, there are a lot of the accessories and the accoutrements, they are contributing to it. But nothing can take away from the core, and the core is the person, the talent, the skill, the capability. That is in abundance over here. The fact that you get it at a cost arbitrage makes it even sweeter. But the fact that it is abundantly available, the second I would say is, I think we were talking about earlier, the jugaad mindset. Okay? So we had that jugaad mindset. Let's translate it to corporate. We are problem solvers. We are industrious. It's even the bane of our society that we are not 9 to 5. We were talking about, somebody in Australia, of course, they're not going to be working beyond the 4 p.m. and they're not, hankled by the title, and fractional leadership is coming up there. Try doing fractional leadership over here. It's emerging, but not there. So why? Because so there's some merit to some of our, I would say, inherent personality traits as a culture, and that's what is driving a lot of the traffic, a lot of the movement. And I would like to believe, unlike the BPO sector that became the capability center, the knowledge centers, and what have you, we now call them, the GCCs or the captive centers, whatever you may want to call them, they're in here now for the long run. If you see the scale in the last 2 years that these have been set up across, you look at the bigs, the who's who of the big four, or you're talking about the healthcare domain, or you talk about the tech organizations, massive. Now they're not rooting and putting this in for 5 year or 10 year. They're in here for the long haul. The long haul is only sustainable by talent. And I go back to another point that I made earlier. I think the fact, and I will borrow, sir, from your point, you said 3 Ds: digitization, demographics and disruption. I think the digitization and the demographics, we have it. And we have so much talent in our smaller towns. But because of the embedding of the digitization and the access to digitization of the digital world or that's opened up post-COVID for us, I personally believe that we have opened up a whole new, not workforce I would say, but a whole new area where we are, tapping untapped talent. And the other thing is with these talent, you will get, that has been our experience, you will get commitment, you will get loyalty, which is now becoming a rare thing in today's world. When somebody said you don't come with a tenure, it's 2 years, 3 years, and you're on to your next one. Well, when you're tapping into the tier 2, tier 3, and the smaller towns, it's refreshing to see that some of those cultural values are coming back to help us even in the corporate world. So that's something to think about.
Vikash, as the banks spread their wings beyond the traditional places, the affluent, you use that word affluent, as we go mass, as banks and financial services look to go really mass, the next gen workers, will they help drive us? What are the talent, what are the skills that some of the managers here, HR leaders here need to think about?
Absolutely. So a couple of things. What will technology do specific to BFSI as a domain? Technology will democratize knowledge. That will happen, right? It will no longer be a preserve of a chosen few. It will be democratically available. So what will that happen? How does it translate to the workforce then? For the workforce, then roles will become fungible. And I recollect somebody mentioning on the panel here that, I think Smriti was mentioning that technology, my best friend at work was, Amit was mentioning that. And I completely agree with him. And he mentioned he did miss out one particular role.
कितने दोस्त बनाएंगे?
Marketing, yes.
कितने दोस्त बनाएंगे?
Sorry?
कितने दोस्त बनाएंगे? पहले CHRO, फिर CFO, फिर CTO, सभी दोस्त बन जाएंगे फिर तो?
देखो, आपको दोस्त पसंद नहीं हो, आपको, हमारी तो आदत है HR वालों की, तो पत्रकार तो दोस्त नहीं बनाते, right? So coming back again, these roles will become fungible. And I'm not talking about the C-suite. C-suite are fairly limited roles. I'm talking about the front-end level, at the execution level. The roles will start becoming fungible. So there will be a requirement for each individual having multiple skill sets so that whenever there is a requirement, people step into from role A to a role B without much of a change, right? There cannot be an elaborate exercise of taking him through a training program, acclimatization of that in that particular role. It will have to be at a on tap, basically, if I can say that. So that's an option which I see and which, in my opinion, HR leaders should be prepared of. Second, if the roles becomes fungible, coming to CHROs themselves, as I mentioned, I think absolutely right. If institutions have to disrupt, by whichever manner, right? The CEO's fallback option will be invariably the CHRO. Trust me on that. Because he will be able to, that will be the pivot around which the entire organization will rotate to bring in that disruption. So these are the two things which I see very clearly, which will impact both the CHRO's office as well as the people in the workforce.
Amit, the democratization of opportunity, let's say in your sector, with medical tourism, the world is wanting to come to India. How does India leverage that? This word has been around and this opportunity has been around for a while. How do we leverage technology and the people? And again, I keep saying that some of the people here could be driving that tomorrow.
No, I think again, a great question. I think when you look at the whole healthcare, a big piece that's really going to come out. Today, India does about $10 billion of international business, like we say, foreign patients coming here, given the cost arbitrage that we have. And it's not just the cost arbitrage, Ashutosh, I must tell you. It's the quality with the cost arbitrage that India provides, right? Interestingly, there was a survey on this last week in The Guardian. And in the UK, there was a survey to most people to say, what does your family doctor look like? And very interestingly, one common trait came. Middle-aged guy, grey hair, someone from India. Oh. And this is last week's Guardian. Now, with that in mind, we've been a talent supplier to the world for about 50 years now. And I think it's time for us to really harp that, because if you look at some of the best institutions that have been created, are people who've gone from here, created great institutions in across the world, and have come back to serve, whether it's the Devi Shetty or the Medanta that you're talking about, right? Today in healthcare, there is no private equity that hasn't invested in healthcare because they realize the power of compounding that's going to happen to healthcare. Then we have a flip side to it. A lot of people say it's become more commercial. It was an industry, and if it has to survive, it has to have the whole element which is round, right? So I think for us, it will be imperative that along with healthcare, we look at the whole digital ecosystem that will enable this. Today I was shocked. I've lived abroad for the last 10 years, and when I returned to this country after 10 years, I was shocked. We have a very premier hospital in Raipur. Today Raipur has an A-grade airport that can do a liver transplant. And we're attracting people from Africa to go to Raipur because the hospitals here are fairly full and get the surgery done. Now that's the power, right? With this, you said something very interesting, and I'll connect it to this. There needs to be a fundamental shift in the leadership that's going to run all of this. And what will the leadership need? The leadership will need about really understanding how do I blend technology to the day-to-day operational activities that I do. And that will require a lot more purposeful thinking. That is not just about the money. It's about the cure and adding value, and money will always be an outcome. And unless you repeat it 100 times, that's the purpose, the outcome will happen. I think that's a deep requirement for leadership in the time to go forward. So some of these will really enable the international business that we are talking about for the quality of care and the new age leadership that might be required to funnel this.
Okay, I'll just add, I'm just reminding Mona, since I didn't mention the figures, it's at the top of my head. GCCs in 24-25, ending March 25, did 64 billion in revenue, 64 billion in revenue. So they're not small. And if you unleash the power of IP, I don't know where things will go to. And they employ about 2 million people. So there you go. Sir, now coming to you, because you've heard everyone. How do we leverage that technology? And we can't choose there. So some things are human. So how do we keep the human part of human resource possible, at the same time leverage technology? How are some of the students who you teach, and they are HR leaders as well, how are they thinking about it?
So I had promised to Nidhi that I'll take a different path at some point of time. So with all
Nidhi,
your
beware.
permission, I will take a different path. I have a bad throat, so live with me.
You want some warm water?
No, it's okay. I mean, just a few minutes, we should close on time. So first of all, to me, it's been getting boring. We are all telling ourselves what we want to believe, not what the real world is, okay? Let me first tell you a couple of things that we are not doing. You start with human. Huh? You can never be human unless you take assessment of how inhuman you are. Okay?
Wow.
You can never, what is human is not, it's a relative, it's a journey. Okay? We must know that every sector we are talking and celebrating here has a deep underbelly of a very different kind, which we do not expose, we do not talk. We want to come here and preach everything is going well. We mutually admire each other, especially the HR community, voice of management, trying to say everything is great. Please stop that. Let's call the elephant in the room. Let us understand. Let me take each one of them. GCCs.
So I'll just add, in the country we use a term we often hear in the papers, sab changasi, all is well.
Yeah.
So it may not be true.
It's absolutely not true, because the operation is always successful, but the patient always dies. Okay? And what is not true needs to be called out responsibly, not necessarily with the intent to criticize anyone, but to take stock of what is not right. So, bulk of the GCC still is a cost game. The parent organization is not doing us any great charity to come here. They are suffering from huge insecurity of job losses. The middle managers don't believe there. I've talked to several middle managers in American, European ownership-based parent organizations who run GCCs here in my research. They are absolutely insecure of India. The middle managers do not transfer any value-adding work to Indians. Indian talent is still used as cheap labor. Mainframe in many companies still is the source of revenue. Old technologies still rule the roost. AI is at best a prototype and a pilot. Lot of our talent is paid cheap and inexpensive. We continue to glorify the new GCC based on the same principles on which we built the IT industry. It has not become a center of innovation as you believe. It is not adding value. Management is making it believe that it is adding value because it is adding value in reducing cost, not necessarily in creating products of very high order. We continue to be a services economy, and this must be recognized. Are there exceptions? Does Pegasystem do a different thing or a Paraxel different thing? I probably concede they do. But is this the norm? It is not. The norm is still GCC is much less a capability center. It is still in the old captive and in-house center mode. It's a new name to give respectability to Indian talent which gets carried away brand names and titles and designations. The job doesn't change, but if you're called a joint general manager, you feel something has changed to general manager. So this is how you are in a world of GCC. Take healthcare. Private equity investment in healthcare, how much of it is good or bad, I do not know. But as a patient, I can tell you, I've been a patient. I dread, he said, who is a family doctor in UK? It is an Indian. But do you know who is a family doctor in Hyderabad? There is nobody. Family doctor as an institution has been eaten up, gobbled up by corporate hospitals. Why? It doesn't suit the private equity. It doesn't suit money-making business the way if clinical treatment is done without too many investigations, without the luxury of 5-star treatments, money cannot be made. So are there corporate hospitals which are doing a great job in giving liver transplants? The answer is yes. Have we advanced in technology? The answer is yes. But is healthcare affordable? Is insurance really not in cohorts with healthcare? Are we not paying the same injection costs more if your insurance can pay for it differently if you stay in a larger room than in a smaller room? Every day you as a patient is cheated in hospitals. Through billing is opaque, treatment procedures opaque, doctors behave like dogs, gods, sorry about it, and doctors treat you like whatever I wanted to say. So the reason is that they are the my bap at that time. You are in a blackmail situation. Does the doctor ever every doctor is rewarded for how many patients he sees a day. Volume decides his pay and incentives. How can he see hundreds of patients in a day unless he wants to make money? He can't give me more than 10 minutes. I go to him because he has a brand image. The hospital puts a hoarding. Is this the healthcare that you want to inherit? Do you want to challenge it? Do we as professionals challenge and build professions? Madam talked about Jugaad. Do you know that is single most bane of India? India can never be a global leader if it confuses shortcuts with smartness. If we have to establish quality, we must follow global processes, standards, protocols in everything we do. We must be deeply committed to professionalism. Somehow, Jugaad is not the answer. We need to produce products that are enduring, quality that is staying, and we can be proud of presenting to the world. Just in the short term, solving some problems is not deep, enduring solutions. So if we celebrate wrong virtues, we will build a nation on wrong foundations.
So, sir, the question as
So I'm sorry, every person that is speaking must take responsibility of celebrating what is good, but also pointing out what is failing behind it. So for us, that's about all. What should we do? We should stop a lot of these unnecessary celebrations and ask more critically, are we really doing what we are supposed to do? Are we really professional and quality oriented? That's what I teach, by the way, to my students.
Okay, point taken, sir. The human in the human resource is what I want to talk about. Is that an opportunity, or is that one way tomorrow's companies are looking at? As we kind of, some of the things that sir pointed out.
No, I think he's right in saying that we need to take a hard look at what we are doing right and what we are doing wrong. And I don't think it just applies to institutions, it also applies to organizations. It's great to celebrate what we are doing well, but we also need to look and figure out what we can do better and how and what needs to be done. It could be painful in the short run, but good in the long run. And all of that starts with humans, because ultimately humans, yes, we will have a lot more automation and technology in the future, but today it's mostly humans. So the answer is in human resources. So today, are we doing things for the comfort of our leaders, or are we doing something which is good for the organization? We've spoken a little bit about, contract, we've spoken about flexi work, etc. And sometimes we need to take a hard look and figure out if what we have or what we are advocating for is right. And to sort of bring it back to flexibility, a lot of companies have mandated, come back to office. Now, is that right? Is that something we need to do? Or is flexibility better? One reason people say everybody needs to be back in office, we need to brainstorm. Everybody needs to get into a room to figure out the way forward. Does that work? Do we ask ourselves, like Professor said, does that work? Is that the way? Is that the answer to moving forward? How many of you have heard of the hippo effect? The hippo effect is essentially highest paid person in office is always right. So when you sit in a conference room and discuss, brainstorm, regardless of whether they're the boss or not, if the person who's highest paid expresses an opinion, that's the way forward. Now, objectively, is that what we are, as when we talk about, like Professor said, looking inwards and figuring out what's wrong? Are we sort of saying this is going to be what we are primarily doing? Or do we want to really look at what it is that can drive change? And is flexibility one of those things we need to look at as we look to evolve to sort of grow as an organization in the future? That's one. The second is around, are we investing in making sure that our employees are able to solve for the future? And that's also on people and on companies. Individually, I should be willing to, be ready to take on the challenges of the future. And whilst the company needs to be able to invest in me. So essentially, yes, I think as we look to make our company's organization stronger, and as we look internally as to fix what's wrong, it is clear that some of those answers lie within what we do with our people.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I'll just want to add here. At some point in time, when I was in campus, and professor, one professor who taught me at that point in time, and there at that point in time, we were just reading from the books, so you did not have so much to relate to, right? You didn't have an experience. So how do you know, what do you understand by empathy, right? So the session was going on, and so the professor gave an example. How do you relate to empathy? So he gave an example, and trust me, Professor, you'll like it. That HR is like a mother. What does a mother do? No matter how much wrong is with the child, the mother will always highlight the positives of the child. That's empathy. So no matter how much wrong is with the country, even if we are moving a step ahead, an inch ahead, we should celebrate that inch. Should we not, does the mother not admonish you at the back end for what 100 things you have done wrong? She does. But in her own private manner. You need not advertise that. What you advertise is the good part. What you celebrate is the good part. What is more visible is the good part. But that does not mean that at the back end, and which is what HR should also do. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people take Gallup and GPTW and so on and so forth, multiple surveys. What does that indicate? What does that say? We do not celebrate our success. I'm sure many would have received that feedback in their organizations. So the generation today is not saying that you don't point out my errors. The generation and the society today at large is saying is that you do point out, but point out to me in private, right? Point out to me in a manner where I will learn, mentor me, guide me, coach me, help me develop that, help me succeed. But simultaneously, let us together celebrate the successes overall.
Okay, that's a very valid point. Sure, sir. Sure. Sure.
What happens is that if we were truly celebrating success, nobody would grudge it. But if we present a failure as success, people can see through. In the name of celebration, what has happened is a lot of these corporatees of trying to whitewash, ordinary things into big things are actually taking the focus away. That's the complaint I have. We need to be honest. We should certainly, when it's truly a success, we should certainly celebrate it. But we should not prematurely celebrate a success in the name of false motivation and believe that people are believing you. So we are increasing the distrust by this kind of a, mutually admiring communication which doesn't hold each other accountable. What we need to do in every forum, especially HR managers, see, you have this view of HR that HR is the mother. You should ask Ayur Shraddha to tell you what is, if you have seen her, what is HR, what your employees think as HR. HR thinks that employees, I've never found a more unempathetic mother than HR. The reason is, HR is the first person to fire you. HR is the first person. HR, do you know, in a country which needs employment, the most important KPI for HR managers is to so-called optimize headcount, which is don't give jobs, reduce jobs, remove jobs.
Sir,
this is the job on which this is done.
Sir, I may...
Sorry, you got my point.
Pardon me, Vikas. Is it only restricted to corporates or is it happening beyond? And why I seek apology from you is surname thoda milta hai. इसलिए मैं कुछ ज़्यादा नहीं बोल सकता.
ऐसा है कि अच्छा दिन तो जरूर आएंगे.
Okay, sir. Okay, one last question. Sure.
So I just want to add to that on the human part of it. And I think it's very important. I'll take a leaf from what I heard from Professor and something that I believed. Is HR is the only profession that doesn't have its own work. I hire for somebody. I do somebody else's performance management. I fire for somebody. I give somebody else's salary. What about me? Everyone else. Sales is driving his own function. Technology is doing his own function. I'm doing everything for somebody else. So for me, what also happens is that I need to be equally and even more responsible in my approach and really deciphering what do I stand for. So to Professor's point, I think it's very imperative to have those honest, open communication around purpose and why an activity is done. If it's a headcount reduction exercise, I don't think so. HRs today need to go up there and say that, you need to be off it. It's the line manager that has made the decision. You are facilitating the fact that it's not as cruel as what he can do. I'm a person that I have more emotion and I will do it right by the law and give him a little more than my absence would have created. So I think that thinking is important, and today's generation that's coming out even more, vociferous. And that's where you see a significant movement of the CEO's reliance on HR advice, which he will not take, like yesteryears, which he would do. So I think that's a very important part of the human coming in, back to the human resources.
Okay, one last question. I want everyone a quick answer, please. The culture of the organization. In these times where distributed workforce, how do you drive it, and what does the CEO do in addition to the HR leaders? Vikas, if you can start short answers because we're running out of time.
Might as well not speak then. No, I keep on taking digs at Ashutosh, so please don't get me wrong. So coming back, yes, we are the most distributed amongst all the colleagues sitting here, 500 odd different locations across the country, branch, you go to a branch, every nook and corner of the country, and you have a branch, and there will be 5-10 people from the bank sitting there. Now, how do you ensure that whatever is spoken at the ivory tower, which is a corporate office, flows down to the last man standing there? So that's where you communicate. How much the top management and the CEO included connect to the ground? How often does he do that, right? And good part is that today we have multiple mediums to connect, right? You have, and then Amar, my friend here, would know, and we created a WhatsApp group where MD interacts with the top 300 leaders across the rank and file. Today we did that, right? So there are multiple mediums. I think communicating more, I don't think there is any alibi to that particular element from a percolating the vision perspective. I don't think there is any option.
So I think a great culture is where you talk more of the craft, whatever you do. If you're playing the sport, talk of the sport, not what the sport, when you become successful, what you get paid from the sport. Today, it's become a lot more about outcomes that the craft will give you. I think great cultures only focus on this craft, whatever business you are in. I'm in healthcare, you're in GCC. The more you talk about the craft, the better your culture is.
I think for me, it is about walking the talk, and I think Vikas touched upon a distributed work environment, and all of us are in that space. So for me, walking the talk is very, very critical, and enabling our managers. We talk so much about leadership forums, we talk about so much, but the last mile connect that creates value for the employee is the manager. So I think it begins with the manager and enabling our managers, not with tools and technology, but how we work. Also giving them playbooks, giving them scenario-based learnings. One of the things that I heard as feedback on floor with my managers across different global locations was, don't give us just digital learning or bite-sized learning. We want to come together and exchange peer-to-peer learning. We want to exchange what are we facing on the floor. We want to learn from each other, right? So we talked about reverse mentoring, but I think what is really powerful is all of us are learning in the game at the same time. So I think peer group learning can be extremely powerful in building a vibrant and a robust culture, and it starts with enabling our managers.
I'll come to you, Professor, at the end.
I'd probably say that I think transparency and communications been said to death. But I also think the culture of the organization is largely also centered on the core. What you stand for, what's your vision, what are you in here, what is it that you're solving, and what is it that you're doing. And if you don't lose sight of it, for example, we at Parexel, patience really is at the heart of it all. And so we have consciously, initially it was very conscious, and now it is almost innate that behavior has now inculcated in everything that we do. So that is one, I would say. And the other one I would say, kind of picking up from what Smriti mentioned, of course the top leadership is the culture is driven top down. But it is the middle management layer which is the custodian of that culture, because 90% of the organization experience the organization through that middle management. Very few have access, as much as they may say, to the top management. So if the company is good, the culture is toxic, the culture is enabling, it's what they're experiencing from the middle management. So as long as we're able to support, enable, and take care, if I would say, of our middle managers, the middle management, I think you are on the right path for a very strong, productive, maybe, culture within the organization.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I think it's about why does this company exist? What's the purpose of its existence, and how does that translate into this company's interaction with every stakeholder? Could be employees, vendors, customers, and shareholders. Is the values that you purport reflecting itself in every interaction? Mona said middle managers. I would sort of expand that and say every employee. Is your purchase person, how does he interact with your vendors? How does your salespeople interact with customers? How does your HR team or How do your managers interact with their teams, etc.? So that's it. And I think it's important that companies go for authenticity. What's in an EVP needs to measure up with what the actual lived experience of every employee is. I think that's what makes for successful culture.
Sir, while technology drives...
You change the topic.
No, I'm coming to it.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
How does the culture leader, which is the CEO,
Yeah.
ensures...
Now in the context of technology.
Yeah.
So
It has to ensure. That's important.
First thing is for a change, I agree with all of them. I'll tell you because they all said all the right things. The tongue-in-cheek here is, you know, you cannot walk your talk if you talk more than you can walk. Much like how you cannot, bite more than you can chew. So the problem with corporate India is they talk more than they can walk. And they're very good at it. Everyone knows the recipe to build a culture. That has not been our problem. So you don't need one more economic times seminar to decide how culture is built. Because everyone has got a playbook for it. Everyone knows it starts with top, it got etc. The start point is the question itself. You said, how do you drive a culture? Sir, you don't drive a culture. You co-create a culture. You live it together with your employees in its failures and successes, authentically and truly and honestly. And take stock periodically of what of your cultural promise is breaking down in the heat of day-to-day interaction between manager and employee. That's how you build and sustain a culture. For that, we need to talk less and walk more. That's all that we see. That is our real issue.
Okay. I'll just try and sum up some of what was said as we end. Some of the notes that I took down. For a company, and because you are people leaders, some of the things I took down, the dichotomy, 24/7 kind of a workplace versus some people who may be asking for a work-life balance. Human resource, the human part of human resource versus the transactional talent, some of the, maybe the fractional leaders or something, which is very transactional. Global leaders driving you vis-a-vis the local talent that is driving you. And of course, the last point that you mentioned, sir, culture, top-down vis-a-vis co-created. So some of the issues that you probably will have to deal with and drive, maybe if I may again use the word drive, because they're people leaders.
We are all drivers now.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us.